In the year 2249, humanity had spread across hundreds of star systems, building cities on planets that were once only distant points of light in Earth's night sky. Over time, other species came to know humans by a special name, Death. It was not a nickname humans chose for themselves. It was a name the galaxy gave them because Earth was considered one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered. Almost everything on Earth could fight, bite, sting, or poison. Even the weather could kill. So when humans survived such a world and grew strong enough to travel through space, alien species learned to respect them and fear them just a little. But there was another side to the Deathworlders that outsiders did not always understand. Humans were not only tough, they were protective. They fought hard, but mostly they fought to keep others safe. When someone sent a call for help, humans answered. When someone was weak, humans stood beside them. This reputation spread slowly, like quiet whispers between star systems, but it never mattered much. Most species still believed humans were more dangerous than kind. Only a few truly knew how deeply humans cared about protecting life. Far above the outer colonies, where peaceful settlers lived under the soft glow of artificial skylines, the United Terran Warfleet floated like a metal constellation. Thousands of ships rested in perfect formation, each one armed, polished, and ready for anything. These ships were not usually active. Most of the time, the galaxy stayed calm enough that they only ran routine patrols. Many soldiers spent their days training, repairing equipment, or writing messages home. No one expected trouble. No one expected anything at all, really. It was just another quiet rotation in the cold emptiness of space. Then the signal arrived. It was so small at first that the communication officers almost missed it. It blinked once, disappeared, blinked again, and then began repeating. The frequency was strange. It did not match any known human language, nor any of the thousands of alien languages stored in the fleet database. It pulsed like a heartbeat. It carried a rhythm that felt urgent, frightened, and desperate. The officers stared at the screen, unsure of what they were looking at. Then one of them leaned forward and frowned. Something about the message felt alive. They sent it to the signal interpretation lab within seconds. Analysts rushed into the room with steaming cups of coffee, wiping sleep from their eyes as they studied the strange code. The room buzzed with quiet tension. One officer played the sound aloud. The entire room froze. Even though none of them understood the words, the emotional tone was unmistakable. Someone out there was begging for help. Within minutes, the alarm spread across the ship like lightning. Officers hurried through the metallic corridors. Doors slid open and shut. Engines hummed. The signal grew louder and clearer as the analysts worked to decode it. When the translation finally appeared on the main screen, it left the entire team silent. It was a distress call, not just any distress call. It was flagged as universal, which meant it was meant for all species, not just humans. That made the message even stranger. No one had used universal distress coding in decades. Only civilizations on the edge of collapse used it, and usually as a last attempt to survive. The coordinates were even more confusing. They pointed to a region that was supposed to be uninhabited. According to every map, chart, and long-range scan, nothing lived there. No planets, no stations, no colonies, with just empty space. But the distress call came from somewhere, and its tone was unmistakably real. Inside the central command hall, holographic screens flickered on as officers studied the location. Some argued that the signal might be a trap. Pirates had used similar tricks before. Others insisted that, even if it were a trap, it still needed investigation. Human instinct leaned heavily toward helping, but human caution whispered warnings. Admiral Reina Vasquez was the one who had to make the decision. She stood before the giant viewing window that showed the endless stars. She had seen real traps in her lifetime. She had also seen innocent lives lost because no one answered their cries for help. She listened to the recorded distress call again, letting the emotion within it settle in her heart. It sounded like someone trying not to lose hope. Someone who truly believed someone, somewhere, would risk everything to come for them. But before she could decide, more information came in. A junior officer rushed into the hall with new sensor data. The words he spoke changed everything. Strange energy distortions were forming around the signal's coordinates. Something was happening out there. Something powerful, unnatural, and possibly deadly. The readings were unstable, almost as if space itself were being bent or twisted. The analysts stared at the numbers in disbelief. They had never seen anything like it, and the distortions were growing. Suddenly, the debate over whether to help became much more complicated. If the energy field expanded, it might swallow anything nearby. Sending ships into it without knowing its nature could mean losing the fleet's best vessels. Some officers suggested sending only a small scout team. Others said humanity should not interfere at all until they knew whether the signal came from an enemy. But that was the problem. They did not know. Meanwhile, political pressure began to build in the background. Humans were watched closely by other species. If they acted too aggressively, they might be accused of starting a conflict. If they acted too slowly, they might be blamed for ignoring a cry for help. No matter what they did, Someone in the galaxy would judge their choice, yet none of that mattered to the Deathworlders on a personal level. For them there was one simple truth. Someone was out there, alone, afraid, and possibly dying. While the officers continued arguing, the signal suddenly changed. It grew louder, faster, and more frantic. The rhythm transformed from a plea for help to a raw cry of fear. New data appeared, data that revealed something terrifying. The sender was biological, alive, and classified as not. That meant it was a person, not a machine, not a trap, not a decoy. A living being was out there, sending their final message. The command center went silent again. Somewhere in the empty darkness, a voice was calling to them, and it sounded like it was running out of time. The distress call repeated again, and this time the pattern trembled, as if the sender's voice or whatever passed as their voice was breaking. It was the sound of someone who had tried everything else and had only one hope left, that someone kind would hear them, that someone strong would come. In that moment, Admiral Vasquez felt a familiar heaviness settle in her chest. She had heard similar tones once before, during a disaster on a mining moon decades earlier. Back then, many lives were saved because someone chose to act. Some decisions were risky, but necessary. Some moments in history demanded courage over caution. She looked around at her officers. Their faces mirrored her thoughts, fear mixed with determination, uncertainty balanced against responsibility. The Deathworlders were powerful, yes, but they were not feared because they sought war. They were feared because they would not stand by when life was endangered. As technicians replayed the last part of the signal, a quiet realization spread through the room. No other species in the nearby region had the strength, speed, or bravery to respond fast enough. If humans did not go, no one would. For a moment, the entire fleet hung in a fragile silence, as if the universe itself waited for their decision. Then the alarm lights flickered, a soft hum filled the hall, and the fleet's engines stirred. Something in the air shifted, because even before the order was officially given, everyone on board already knew what was coming. Humans did not ignore distress calls. It simply was not in their nature. Far across the stars, an alien voice cried out again, and in that instant, without speaking a word, every Deathworlder aboard the fleet understood one thing clearly. They were going to answer it. The moment the distress signal was confirmed as real, a wave of activity spread through the United Terran War fleet like a sudden storm. People who had been resting hurried to their stations. Engineers slid under humming engines to perform last-minute diagnostics. Pilots strapped themselves into their chairs, running through safety checks with fast, practiced motions. The air inside the fleet's main carrier felt heavier, charged with a mix of fear, purpose, and something else in emotion every Deathworlder understood well. Responsibility. Admiral Vasquez walked through the command bridge with her usual calm expression, but her heart was beating a little faster than normal. She could feel the weight of hundreds of thousands of lives under her command. She could feel the eyes of her officers waiting for clear orders. She could feel the distress call echoing in her mind like a whisper that refused to fade. It reminded her of the old Earth saying, if you can help someone, you must. But helping was not simple this time. The coordinates came from an empty sector of space with no planets, no stations, no known civilizations. For a distress signal to appear from a place like that meant one of two things. Either someone had been passing through and suffered an accident, or something out there had forced them into danger. Neither option was comforting. Meanwhile, the analysts worked non-stop to decode every layer of the message. They pulled apart symbols, compared emotional patterns, and ran simulations to guess what species the sender might belong to. After hours of effort, they still could not identify the origin. They only knew the signal came from a biological being, not mechanical. That alone made the situation feel urgent. In one of the side labs, a young analyst named Darren played the message over and over again. Each time he heard the quivering tone, his chest tightened. Even though he didn't understand the words, he understood the feeling behind them. He imagined someone out there, floating alone in the cold dark, hoping so hard that someone would hear them. He whispered to himself, "We're coming, I promise." Across the fleet, similar thoughts filled the minds of soldiers and officers. Even though none of them had seen the alien, they already felt a connection. That was the strange thing about humanity. Even after becoming one of the toughest species in the galaxy, they never lost their ability to care. Their homeworld had been harsh, yet their hearts had grown soft in all the right places. Despite that, the fleet still had to operate carefully. Every move needed precision. Every decision needed logic as much as emotion. In the war room, the officers gathered around a large holographic display showing the coordinates. The projection flickered with images of a starless region, empty except for a small, blinking point, the location of the distress call. Around it, energy waves appeared as unstable streaks of blue and white. "Energy readings are increasing," reported Lieutenant Hera. "Whatever is happening out there is not slowing down. If anything, it's getting worse." Another officer, Captain Rourke, studied the patterns with narrowed eyes. It might be a gravitational distortion, or a breach in spacetime, or maybe a fusion reactor meltdown. It's hard to say. "Whatever it is," Admiral Vasquez said slowly, It's dangerous, and it's getting closer to the source of the distress call. Silence settled over the room. The officers knew what she was implying. If the energy distortion reached the alien, there would be no one left to save. Still, not everyone agreed on how to proceed. Commander Oren crossed his arms. We should first send a mic. If we jump in blindly, we risk losing ships. We don't know what's waiting for us. Captain Rourke shook his head. A drone will take too long. The situation is changing every minute. If we wait even a few hours, it might be too late. Vasquez listened quietly, weighing their words. Both sides had good reasons. Both sides wanted to save the alien, but they needed a solution that didn't risk unnecessary lives. While they debated, the distress call suddenly shifted again. The sound coming through the speakers turned shaky, as if the sender's strength was fading. The signal's rhythm slowed, then pulsed faster, then slowed again, as though the alien was struggling to stay conscious. Everyone froze. In that moment, all arguments ended. We go, Vasquez said softly. No one disagreed. As preparations began, long-range sensors continued scanning the region around the distress signal. That was when they detected something unexpected. There were faint traces of another presence, not human, not friendly. It was just a whisper of a signature, almost too weak to detect, but it carried a familiar pattern. Karun technology, one of the technicians muttered. His voice trembled. The Karun were a species known for predatory behavior. They captured other species, stole technology, and left destruction behind wherever they traveled. They were the opposite of humans in many ways, cold, merciless, and driven by hunger for domination. If they had arrived near the distress call first, then the situation was far worse than anyone had guessed. Admiral Vasquez felt a sharp worry rise inside her. Are they still there? She asked. We can't be sure, the technician replied, but the signature is fresh. The room grew heavy. If the Karun were involved, they might have attacked the alien ship. They might be planning to capture the survivor. They might even be waiting for the humans to arrive, ready to ambush them. Yet despite the danger, no one suggested turning back. The presence of the Karun only strengthened their resolve. If someone was being hunted out there, the Deathworlders were not going to abandon them on the lower decks. Soldiers equipped their armor and checked their weapons. Medical teams prepared emergency kits designed for alien biology, unsure what kind of body they might need to treat. Pilots warmed up engines and reviewed escape routes. And in the hangars, repair crews loaded extra supplies in case the mission required more than rescue. Everything moved quickly, smoothly, almost instinctively. Each person knew what they had to do. That was the strength of the fleet. They trained for the worst, but hoped for the best. Still, fear lingered in the air. Not fear for themselves, but fear that they might be too late. In a quiet corner of the ship, two engineers talked while tightening cables on a shuttle engine. Do you think they're still alive? One whispered. The other hesitated. The signal, it sounds like someone trying not to give up. People don't stop fighting if there's even a tiny chance. So yes, I think they're holding on. Then we'd better get there fast. We will. Meanwhile, in the communication center, analysts tried to strengthen the signal connection. They applied frequency stabilizers, amplified weaker pulses, and attempted to decode new segments of the message. At one point, the signal included a trembling series of tones that resembled coordinates for something else, maybe a warning, maybe additional information, but the data was too damaged to understand. Darren, the young analyst, leaned closer to the screen. Who are you? He whispered. What happened to you out there? The alien never answered, of course, but Darren still felt as if he was speaking to someone real, someone lonely, someone desperately hoping for help. The emotional weight of the distress call spread through the fleet like a quiet, invisible wave. Even those who didn't hear it directly sensed the tension. The fleet had responded to many emergencies in the past, but something about this situation felt different. It felt personal, maybe because the call was so raw, so full of emotion. Maybe because it came from such an empty region, or maybe because everyone sensed that this mission would change something about the galaxy, about the fleet, or about themselves. Hours passed. Energy distortions continued growing around the distress coordinates. The readings became more unstable, more unpredictable. The space seemed to twist and ripple in the projected images, like invisible waves crashing against each other. This is getting worse, Lieutenant Harris said. If we don't move soon, the signal ship might be torn apart. Admiral Vasquez gave the final order. All ships prepare for jump. Across the fleet, engines roared to life. Lights shifted from calm blue to deep red, signaling high alert. Pilots gripped their controls. Soldiers steadied themselves. A hum filled the air, vibrating through every metal surface like the heartbeat of a giant. And just before the jump sequence began, the distress call played one last time. Weak, trembling, almost fading away, the sound echoed through the fleet. It was a voice refusing to surrender. A voice still hoping for help. The voice that reached into the heart of every Deathworlder and made them feel something fierce and unshakable. We're coming, Admiral Vasquez said under her breath. Then the jump engines ignited in a blast of light. The entire Deathworlder war fleet leapt across the stars toward the unknown, ready to face whatever waited in the darkness. determined to save the life, calling out to them even if it meant risking their own asterisk. When the Deathworlder war fleet jumped through hyperspace, the stars stretched into long silver lines, and for a few seconds the universe felt silent and weightless, as if time itself held its breath. Every person in the fleet braced for what they might find on the other side. The distress call, the strange energy readings, the possible presence of the Karuna reading pointed toward danger. But they were ready. They had to be. The jump ended suddenly. With a sharp flash of blue light, the ships emerged in the uncharted region of space, and for a moment no one spoke. They simply stared at what lay before them. It was chaos. Space itself seemed twisted. Waves of glowing energy rippled through the darkness like storms on a cosmic ocean. Tendrils of shimmering light spiraled outward, bending stars, warping signals, and shaking the hulls of even the strongest ships. No human had ever seen anything like it. The distortion was alive, moving, shifting, almost breathing. Lieutenant Hera whispered, What is that?" No one answered. The sensors were confused, throwing out endless warnings. Gravitational pull fluctuated every second. The air inside the ships felt heavy, as though the distortion reached across space and pressed down on them. But in the middle of all that swirling chaos, something small floated alone, a tiny ship, damaged, smoking, and barely holding together. That was the source of the distress call. And they were not alone. Near the tiny alien craft hovered 3 large, dark vessels, sharp, angular, and covered in spines that looked like metallic thorns. They moved like predators circling wounded prey. The Karun had arrived first. A cold chill spread through the entire fleet. The Karun were not a species that offered help. They did not send rescue teams. They did not negotiate. They captured, they hunted, they consumed. And right now, they were preparing to take the injured alien aboard their main vessel inside the Deathworlder command ship. Captain Rock slammed his fist on the console. They're trying to seize them. Admiral Vasquez stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. Open a channel. Try to warn them off. The communication system crackled as the message was broadcast, but the Karun did not respond. Instead, their ships began powering up weapons. Bright red energy, glowing like veins beneath metal skin. The next few seconds felt endless. The Karun aimed directly at the small alien ship, ready to destroy or capture it. And that was when Admiral Vasquez made her decision. Activate Protocol Black. Every officer froze for half a heartbeat. Protocol Black was the highest alert in the Deathworlder fleet. It meant full engagement. It meant no hesitation. It meant they were going to fight. Within seconds, massive shields snapped online, engines roared, and the entire Deathworlder war fleet formed into a battle formation so swift and precise it looked like a single living creature unfolding its wings. Lock weapons, Vasquez ordered. Protect the survivor. The battle began with a burst of blinding light. Human ships moved faster than the Karun expected. The first Deathworlder cruiser shot forward, leaving a bright trail as it fired a pulse beam directly in front of the Karun vessels. The blast didn't hit them, but it sent a clear message: step away. The Karun didn't listen. They fired first. Red beams shot across space, cutting through the distortion waves. The Deathworlder shields lit up like a shimmering dome as the blasts hit them. The bridge shook. Warning alarms but the shields held. Return fire. Captain Rourke shouted. Blue-white beams streaked across the void, slamming into the sharp hulls of the Karun ships. Sparks flew. Armor cracked. But the Karun were tough. They retaliated instantly, firing a cluster of energy missiles that spiraled through the chaos. The fleet weaved between them expertly. Human pilots were known for their instincts, quick thinking, sharp reactions, and nerves strong enough to fly through storms made of death. But even with their skill, the battle was dangerous. The energy distortions made everything unpredictable. Some beams bent some missiles vanished into flickering rips in space and reappeared seconds later in strange places. The battlefield felt alive, shifting unpredictably with every passing moment. Watch the distortions, Hera warned. They're affecting weapon trajectory. Meanwhile, the small alien ship drifted closer to the center of the distortion, pulled helplessly by invisible forces. Its engines flickered weakly. Panels sparked. The distress signal grew fainter, as though the sender was slipping out of consciousness. We're losing them, Darren shouted from the comms lab. If we don't get them out now, the distortion will tear them apart. Admiral Vasquez didn't hesitate. Send a rescue shuttle. Now, the rescue team launched instantly, speeding toward the injured alien craft. The shuttle shuddered violently as it cut through distortion waves, but the pilot fought to keep control. Inside the shuttle, a medical team prepared emergency gear. They had no idea what species the alien was or what condition they were in. They carried universal scanners, oxygen masks, thermal blankets, and medical foam that adapted to any skin type. Their hearts pounded. None of them had expected to be the ones facing the critical moment, but here they were, flying straight into danger. Back in the main battle, the Karun shifted tactics. Their largest ship activated a massive claw-like structure, an energy tether designed to lock onto smaller vessels. It shot forward, glowing red, reaching for the alien ship. They're trying to capture them. Captain Rourke yelled. Admiral Vasquez's voice thundered through the bridge. Not today. She ordered 3 human interceptors to flank the Karun vessel. They moved like lightning, firing in perfect synchronization. Blue beams sliced through the energy tether, breaking it apart. The Karun ship roared back with a barrage of missiles, but the interceptors dodged them by inches, riding distortion currents like surfers on dangerous waves. Meanwhile, the rescue shuttle reached the alien craft. The pilot steadied the ship as best as he could, fighting the pull of the distortions. The boarding team, go. The hatch opened. 2 soldiers tethered themselves and floated out, pushing toward the damaged alien vessel. The hull was cracked. The lights inside flickered like dying stars. When they entered, they found smoke, broken screens, and a single figure lying collapsed near the controls. It was small, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly. Its body was wrapped in protective robes, torn in several places. Its breathing was weak, shallow, frightened. One of the soldiers whispered, "They're still alive." The alien opened its eyes slowly. They were large, soft, and full of exhaustion. When they saw the humans, they didn't look afraid, just relieved, as if they somehow knew the Deathworlders had come to save them. The soldiers carefully lifted the alien and secured them inside the rescue shuttle. The moment they sealed the hatch, the alien's ship groaned as the distortion field began crushing it. Panels collapsed inward. Sparks erupted. Within seconds, the entire vessel was swallowed by a swirling pocket of warped energy and torn apart. But the alien was safe, shuttled to command. The pilot reported breathlessly, "We have them. Returning now." Cheers erupted through parts of the fleet, but the battle wasn't over. The Karun saw the rescue and roared in fury. Their ships surged forward in a desperate attempt to intercept the shuttle. They fired everything they had: beams, missiles, unstable energy blasts that crackled with unpredictable power. The Deathworlder fleet formed a protective wall around the returning shuttle. Ships moved into coordinated positions, absorbing hits, pushing forward, and firing back with precise force. Explosions lit the darkness. Distortion waves bent light like mirrors. Human pilots flew with every ounce of skill they had, dodging, weaving, diving through impossible angles. Finally, the rescue shuttle crossed the shield perimeter of the flagship. "The survivor is aboard," came the official announcement. Relief washed over the entire fleet like a warm wave, but the Karun were not finished. Their largest ship charged a massive weapon, something bright, unstable, and deadly. The energy inside it pulsed like a growing star. Lieutenant Hera turned pale. "Weapon spike. They're going to fire something huge." Admiral Vasquez stared at the glowing energy building in the Karun ship. She knew what that weapon could do. If it hit, dozens of Deathworlder ships could be destroyed. They had one chance. All ships. She commanded, "Full forward thrust. We end this now." The Deathworlder fleet surged forward in a coordinated assault so powerful it looked like a storm of blue fire. Plasma beams, ion shots, and kinetic rounds tore through the Karun vessel. The energy weapon overloaded. Sparks erupted. The hull cracked. Then the enemy ship exploded in a burst of red light that shook the distortion field. The remaining Karun ships hesitated. For the first time, they doubted. And then they retreated within seconds. They vanished into hyperspace, leaving only the echoes of battle behind. Silence filled the command bridge. The distortion still raged around them, but the threat was gone. And deep inside the flagship, the rescued alien lay breathing softly, alive because the Deathworlders refused to abandon them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Admiral Vasquez exhaled slowly and whispered what everyone was thinking. "We did it." The rescued alien lay unconscious in the medical bay while the Deathworlder fleet slowly pulled back from the battlefield. The twisted energy waves continued to roll through the empty region of space, but the danger from the Karun had finally passed. Yet the situation was far from safe. The distortion storm was growing stronger, expanding outward like a giant invisible whirlpool. If they stayed too long, the entire fleet could be pulled into the chaos. But they also could not leave without understanding what had caused it, or whether the rescued alien was stable enough to survive the journey out. Doctors and nurses gathered around the small figure on the examination table. The alien's skin shimmered faintly under the medical lights, giving off a soft pearly glow. Its breathing was fragile but steady. The medical scanner struggled to interpret its biology. The alien species was unknown, and its organs didn't match anything in the fleet's database. But what everyone understood clearly was that the creature was exhausted physically and mentally. Dr. Liana Holt, the chief medical officer, leaned over the alien and gently placed her hand near its wrist area, unsure if that was where a pulse would be found. The scanner beeped softly, showing weak but stable life signs. She sighed with relief. "You're safe now," she whispered, even though the alien could not hear her. "You fought hard. Let us handle the rest." Meanwhile, Admiral Vasquez and her command team gathered in the strategy chamber, studying the latest data on the distortion field. The holographic projection showed swirling waves of blue and white energy stretching across the dark void. Every minute, the waves grew larger, rippling outward like the surface of a disturbed pond. "It's expanding faster than expected," Lieutenant Hera said, pointing at the projections. "If it reaches critical mass, it could collapse into a gravitational tear. We don't want to be anywhere near that when it happens." Captain Rourke added, We need to understand what caused it. Distortions this large don't appear naturally. Vasquez nodded. Her mind kept returning to the damaged alien ship. The survivor might know something. Maybe they were studying it, or maybe they were running from it. Before she could say more, a soft chime sounded. The medical bay was calling. Moments later, Vasquez stepped into the quiet, sterile room with Dr. Holt. The alien was awake. Its eyes were open, large, gentle, and full of emotion. When they met human eyes, they widened, not with fear, but with a deep, fragile relief. The alien tried to sit up, but its muscles trembled too much. "Easy," Dr. Holt said softly. "You're safe. You're on a human ship. You were rescued." The alien blinked slowly. Its voice, when it spoke, was soft and musical, full of trembling notes that the translator device struggled to process. After a moment, words formed. "Thank you, Deathworlders." The room fell silent. The alien did not use the word with fear. It used it with gratitude. Vasquez stepped closer. "My name is Admiral Reina Vasquez. You sent a distress call. We came as fast as we could." The alien closed its eyes briefly, as if overwhelmed. I didn't know who would hear me. I didn't think anyone would come." "We always come," Vasquez said gently. The alien took a slow breath. "My name is I am a scientist of the Arun." The translator hesitated on the word "was," but the tone in Lethrie's voice made its meaning clear. "What happened to your ship?" the doctor asked. Lethrie's expression tightened, filled with pain not of injuries, but of memory. "I was studying a star system that had begun to behave strangely. It was unstable, violent. My people believed something unnatural was influencing it. A weapon, a terrible one." Lethery looked up at Vasquez, eyes shining with fear. "And we were right." The room fell still. Lethery continued, voice trembling. "The Karun found it first. They activated it without understanding or caring what it would do. The star system began to collapse. Space tore open. The distortion grew uncontrollable. My team tried to shut it down, but they were taken. All of them. I barely escaped." The doctor placed a comforting hand on Lethery's arm. "You're safe now. You're with us." Lethery shook their head. "No, none of us are safe. The distortion is still growing. If it reaches a critical limit, it could spread into neighboring systems. It could destroy everything in its path." The air in the medical bay turned heavy. Vasquez felt the weight of the new responsibility settle onto her shoulders. Saving Lethery had been the first step. Now they had to save entire star systems from destruction. "What do we need to do?" she asked. Lethery closed their eyes. "I have the data. Everything my team collected is stored in a memory core. If your people can understand it, you might be able to collapse the distortion safely." A tear slid down the alien's shimmering cheek. "We died trying to stop it. But your ships are strong. Your minds are clever. You might succeed where we couldn't." Vasquez nodded. "Then we'll do everything we can." She left the medical bay with new purpose. The command center buzzed with activity. Scientists rushed to analyze the data Lethery provided. The memory core contained diagrams, energy signatures, gravitational patterns, and notes written in the Arun language. Translating it would take time, but even the first fragments gave them a chilling picture. The distortion was not natural. It was a side effect of a rogue stellar weapon, something that tore open space to suck energy from stars. The weapon had been activated accidentally or carelessly by the Karun. Now it was feeding on the surrounding space like a black hole that hadn't fully formed if they didn't collapse it soon. It would grow until it became unstoppable. Hours passed as the fleet worked tirelessly. Data transferred between ships. Engineers argued over possible solutions. Scientists ran simulations. Every attempt to model the distortion ended in the same result: eventual collapse that would take entire systems with it. But then a pattern emerged. One of the scientists shouted across the lab, "The distortion has a central anchor point. It's unstable, but it's holding the entire field together. If we target it." Captain Rourke finished the sentence over the comms. "We can collapse the distortion and stop its expansion." Admiral Vasquez stood over the holographic display. "What happens to us if we're nearby when it collapses?" "We'll have seconds to escape," the scientist replied. "If we're too slow, the shockwave will crush us." "Can we survive it?" A heavy silence followed. "Maybe," the scientist whispered, "if everything goes perfectly." Vasquez didn't hesitate. "Prepare the plan." The fleet shifted into a new formation, aligning weapons toward the center of the distortion storm. Waves of energy pushed against their shields. The ships groaned under the pressure. Pilots gripped their controls. Engineers shouted through comm channels. Everyone felt the danger in their bones. Lethery watched from the medical bay, eyes filled with worry and hope. To see the Deathworlders fighting not for themselves, but for the galaxy, it overwhelmed them. Finally, the targeting systems locked onto the distortion's anchor point. It flickered like a faint heartbeat in the storm. "Fire," Vasquez commanded. Beams of brilliant blue light shot forward, cutting through the twisting waves. The anchor point resisted at first, glowing more brightly as it absorbed the impact. The distortion roared, sending violent ripples across space. "Keep firing," Rourke shouted. The fleet poured every ounce of power they had into the center. Panels sparked, shields flickered, engines overheated. But they didn't stop. Then, suddenly, the anchor point cracked. A blinding flash burst outward, shaking every ship. The distortion began collapsing inward, spiraling faster and faster like a whirlpool pulling back into itself. "Jump engines ready," a pilot yelled now. Vasquez ordered. The entire fleet jumped at the same moment. The distortion exploded into silence. Light swallowed everything, then darkness, then stars. The Death fleet appeared safely outside the collapsing region. Behind them, the distortion folded into nothing, vanishing like a candle. Being snuffed out, silence filled every ship. Then cheering erupted through the holes. They had done it in the medical bay. Lethari cried softly, overwhelmed with relief. The Deathworlders had not only saved them, they had saved countless worlds, and Admiral Vasquez, standing before the stars, felt a quiet pride fill her heart. They had faced the unknown, fought against predators, and risked their lives for someone they didn't even know. That was who Deathworlders were. They didn't run from danger. They ran toward those who needed them. And on that day, they proved it once more. The news of the rescued aliens spread through the Deathworlder fleet long before the rest of the galaxy heard of it. Dr. Leth, the gentle scientist from the peaceful Aran species, slowly recovered in the medical bay while humans worked tirelessly around them. At first, Lethari felt confusion and fear. Everything about the humans was different: their appearance, their strength, their intensity. Their ships were built like armored beasts. Their voices were deep and powerful. Their presence filled the room like fire and storm. Yet every human who stepped into the medical bay came with kindness in their eyes. They spoke softly to avoid startling the small, delicate Aru. They adjusted the lights so Lethari's sensitive skin wouldn't be overwhelmed. They learned how to prepare food that wouldn't harm Lethari's biology. Dr. Holt, the chief medical officer, stayed by their bedside even when her shift was long over, offering reassurance and gentle encouragement. The more Lethari observed them, the more their fear faded. Instead of monsters from the harshest world in the galaxy, the humans were something entirely different: fierce but compassionate, powerful but gentle when needed, and completely unwilling to let danger stop them from doing what they felt was right. One day, when Lethari had regained enough strength to walk, a small group of officers visited them in the medical bay. Admiral Vasquez stood at the front, her posture firm but her expression warm. Lethari bowed their head respectfully, unsure how to greet a human of such high rank. Vasquez simply smiled and offered her hand. "We are glad you're safe," she said. "You went through something terrible, but you're not alone anymore." Lethari touched her hand lightly, amazed by the warmth and strength in her grip. "Your people, you saved me. You risked everything for someone you had never met. My people would not believe such bravery." Vasquez shrugged gently. "You asked for help. That's enough for us." That simple statement touched Lethari deeply. In their society, decisions required large councils, long debates, and slow collective agreements. For humans, acting to protect someone was immediate, instinctive, unquestioned. It made Lethari feel safe in a way they had never felt before. As Lethari regained health, they were given the chance to explore parts of the ship. The humans showed them the observation deck, the hydroponics garden, the training bay, and the engineering core. Everywhere, the crew treated them with respect and warmth. Some even tried learning simple errand gestures to communicate with them more easily. The crew had expected a weak, fragile alien. Instead, they discovered a brilliant scientist, gentle and curious, eager to understand them. The bond grew quickly when the distortion was finally contained and the fleet began making its long journey back towards Central Territory. Lethari found themselves thinking constantly about the Deathworlders. They had heard terrifying stories about humans since childhood, stories of their strength, their temper, their frightening world filled with storms, predators, and poisonous life. But reality was far more complex. Humans were indeed fierce, but they were also fiercely loyal. They protected life with the same intensity they defended themselves. Their compassion burned as brightly as their courage. Once the fleet reached the nearest diplomatic station, news spread at unbelievable speed. The story of the Deathworlders deploying their entire war fleet to save a single unknown alien became the most talked-about event in dozens of systems. Ships arriving at the station brought whispers and rumors. Some people claimed the humans had destroyed the distortion storm with bare force alone. Others said they had faced an entire army of Karun warriors. Still others insisted that the Deathworlder fleet had been summoned by ancient prophecy. The stories grew wild, exaggerated, and dramatic. But one detail remained the same in every telling. The humans had risked everything for one life. Across peaceful worlds, species who once feared humanity began to view them differently. Instead of picturing them as brutal conquerors, they began imagining them as protectors, dangerous, yes, but driven by honor. Conversations in marketplaces and council chambers revolved around the same thought. If a Deathworlder gives you their word, they will keep it. If a Deathworlder hears a cry for help, they will come even when no one else does. On some worlds, sculptures of human starships appeared in public squares. Children began playing Deathworlder rescue, pretending to charge into imaginary danger to save their friends. On others, elders told stories of the giant warriors from the lethal world who value every living soul. The galaxy had always respected human strength, but now, for the first time, it admired their compassion. And at the center of this growing change was Dr. Letheri. Their gentle voice carried great weight as they spoke to ambassadors, scientists, and councils. They described how the Deathworlders had rescued them, how carefully the humans had treated them, how they had saved countless systems from the distortion. Letheri explained that humans were not the monsters old tales suggested. They were protectors who understood suffering better than most, because their world had taught them the cost of survival from the beginning. Letheri never intended to become an ambassador, but that is exactly what they became. They traveled with the Deathworlder fleet to meetings, offering testimony that only they could give. They acted as a bridge between two very different kinds of life, the gentle pacifist Eren and the fierce Deathworlders. Many alien leaders, who once refused to even speak with humans, suddenly welcomed new diplomatic relations. Trade agreements opened. Scientific partnerships formed. Small cultural exchanges began. The galaxy's sphere slowly transformed into curiosity, then respect. For the first time in decades, the number of interspecies alliances grew. The Death, once isolated due to their reputation, finally found themselves woven into the wider community of the galaxy. But while the light of cooperation grew brighter, shadows deepened elsewhere. Far from friendly space, in the cold dark regions claimed by the Karun, the brood queens gathered in their underground chambers. These great monstrous beings were nothing like the peaceful Erun. Their bodies were enormous, armored, and fearsome. Their minds were sharp with hunger and ambition. Their power came from numbers, strategy, and ruthless instinct. The failure to control the distortion weapon was a humiliation they could not forget. The death of their warriors was an insult they could not forgive. And the fact that humans, a species they considered wild animals, had defeated their plans, filled the brood queens with boiling rage. Their colossal forms shifted restlessly, as they communicated through clicking echoes and thunderous growls. Each queen spoke of vengeance. Each one blamed the Deathworlders for interfering. The Karun had wanted the distortion technology to reshape entire star systems for conquest. Now that dream had collapsed, but they were not foolish. They did not rush into war blindly. Instead, they plotted, they studied, they watched. Scouts were sent to observe human colonies. Analysts were ordered to understand human weaknesses. Spies were dispatched to infiltrate neutral systems and twist public opinion. Every brood agreed on one thing: the humans had become too influential, too admired, too dangerous. Their rescue mission had gained the respect of peaceful worlds, and that respect threatened the Karun's ambitions. The brood queens felt a cold realization settling over them: if humans continued to act with such courage and compassion, more species would align with them. And if the galaxy united behind the Deathworlders, it would be far harder for the Karun to expand their dominion. The queens decided they would strike back, not with one attack, but with a long, carefully planned campaign. First, they would weaken the humans by targeting their allies. Then they would sabotage trade routes and disrupt diplomatic ties. And when the humans were isolated once more, the Karun would launch their attack with overwhelming force. Letheri, unaware of these dark plans, continued to work tirelessly as a symbol of peace and unity. Their voice traveled across many systems, urging cooperation, reminding everyone that the Deathworlders had saved far more than just one life. They had saved hope, but deep inside, Letheri sometimes sensed a strange chill, a quiet warning in their mind. The Karun would not forget. The galaxy's new trust in humans was built on fragile ground, and even as friendships grew, danger was rising in the shadows, sharp-clawed and hungry. Yet the Deathworlders were not afraid. They had faced danger before. They had walked through storms, fought through impossible odds, and survived worlds others called deadly. If the Karuns sought retaliation, the humans would stand their ground once more. And Letheri, the small pacifist scientist who had once been afraid of them, knew one thing with absolute certainty: when the next crisis came, when the Karun struck, when the shadows rose again, the Deathworlders would rise to not as monsters, not as conquerors, but as protectors who would fight for every life worth saving.